Hello, and welcome to Your Average Bear Gaming. I am George. Today, we're going to engage in some vandalism. Straight up defacing a work of art. That is to say, we're going to attempt to paint Operative Umbral Six. This is the model that you get for subscribing to Warhammer Plus for a year. I got it in my hot little hands. Hot little hands? Yeah. I got it in my hands, my grubby little hands, a couple weeks ago, and I've been delaying painting it because I just don't know what I'm going to do with it. But I think I have an idea, and we're going to give it a shot. Here we go. So here's the model, Umbral 6. It's been primed. We'll talk about the painting here in a sec. I want to talk a little bit about the assembly process, or just kind of talk about the model in very general terms, because it is a unique model. And because it's unique, because it has a very special position, I think, in the Warhammer 40k collection, it has some interesting features, elements, whatever you want to call them, that I think need to be addressed before you start painting this guy. And so one of them is just the assembly, or the model building process. So there aren't any options. You use every piece that's on the sprue, and that's fine. It's not really meant to be a model that you play with. At least I don't think. It's more of a display piece, and I think that if we understand this model, the sculpture, in that context, I think we're going to be a lot happier. Having said that, there were a number of, I don't know if they're called gates, but the places where the part of the model meets the sprue, some of them were unnecessarily large, and I say unnecessarily large without having any expertise on how the molding or injection molding, whatever process that they use to create these, I don't know anything about them. So maybe it was necessary, but I'm calling it unnecessarily large because they were just really, really big. They were bigger than anything I've seen so far, and I've built quite a few models, and they were in some places that were really janky. So, like there was one connected to this underneath this this pistol holster, which turns out has a feature that helps the pistol holster glue itself to the leg, and so you can't really tell where the let's call it the gate. You can't tell where the gate ends and where the part is supposed to begin, and so I may have shaved off kind of too much. Same thing happened to me with the left shoulder. That was, again, unnecessarily large and vague. So you couldn't tell when you separated the part from the sprue whether you did it right or not. It's kind of a big no-no. I don't know if it was avoidable. I don't know if it was necessary, but it certainly made it more difficult than it had to be to paint. And the arm gun assembly is weird. And it's kind of finicky, and I don't think I got it right. I ended up with a gap there. I don't think it's necessarily that you don't. I'm pretty sure you can build it so that there isn't a gap there, but I couldn't figure it out. And the parts are small, and they keep falling out of your hands. I don't know. These aren't complaints. I'm just saying that it's a challenging build, so make sure to take your time with it. The last comment I'll make about the building is that you'll notice that the assassin and this platform he's standing on, they are joined together. They are, in fact, one piece. The assassin model, is not removable from this scaffolding. And I thought about, there isn't a need to remove this guy to make him playable, right? You either use the entire model, or you just don't actually play with the model. You keep it on your shelf and look at it and take pictures of it and tuck it in at night, right? You don't really need to remove this model, but some people want to remove the model, and I can't find a non-destructive way of doing that. The feet are firmly attached to this scaffolding along almost all of the contact area, like the entire contact area. I don't know if there's any other models that have the full foot on the surface of the thing that they're standing on, but this guy is it. The one guy that you can't remove, his entire foot is on there. So it would mean that you have to cut the entire length of the foot. You have to do it straight. And the foot is so small that you'd need a really, really thin blade. And an X-Acto blade just isn't going to cut it. It's too thick. You end up shaving the bottom part of the foot. It makes it look kind of weird. I even went out and bought this hand saw. I figured if I just did tiny little motions, I could eventually get through. This was too thick as well. It's 0.2 millimeters, and it's still too thick. I couldn't find anything thinner than this. So our Operative Umbral 6, he's going to stay there. It would have been cool to be able to remove the model, maybe magnetize this guy, like his feet, so he stands on the platform, and then if I got some other assassins, I could swap them out, also with magnets. It'd be kind of a cool thing, but tell you what, if you find a way of removing these feet from this platform without ruining the model, let me know. I would love to watch that video. I suspect you'd have lots to teach me about model building and magnetizing. So I'm going to go with, it can't be done well, so just resist the temptation. It's not going to go well. Having said that, it's gorgeous. It looks really pretty. I can't wait to try to paint this well. And so I'll point out another thing that I did here that's different from usual. So one, I didn't zenithal highlight. These are all the statue part is all primed in black, and the model is all primed in this khaki colored primer. And I didn't zenithal prime it because it just didn't make sense for this particular model. So for instance, this piece is going to end up being a metallic, like a copper or a brass or a bronze, something like that, with significant wearing. And I'm going to use true metallic paint because I'm horrible at non-metallic metals. So I'm going to use actual metallic paint, which means that I need this dark black undercoat, because if I apply the metallic paint as a glaze, bad things are going to happen. So I'm just going to need normal base paint or layer paint, whatever you call it, to cover this in the kind of the base coat that I want. So this is not going to be a base coat glaze. It's going to be a straight up base coat. As for the actual assassin, the base coat for this guy didn't matter. I didn't zenithal highlight for a number of reasons. A, I'm bad at using transparent paints. And B, this guy is supposed to be mostly in shadow. He's supposed to be covered by the statue. So most of the model is going to be in the dark. There's going to be a couple of spots where it's supposed to be sunlight's supposed to be hitting it. So again, zenithal highlighting doesn't make sense here. This model is going to be weirdly dark and muted. If that's what you're going for, you can still make it bright because it's a game. Who cares? But I want to go for a little bit more fidelity. So this guy's going to be mostly in shadow. All right, let's talk about the plan. What's my plan? My plan is to spend most of my time on this guy, and it's going to be like a coppery, brassy kind of a color with plenty of weathering on it. So I'm going to make plenty of use of washing and shading and stuff like that to make this look like it's beaten up. I mean, it is exploded after all, right? So might as well make it look old and beat up. As for the actual operative, I'm not entirely sure yet. I know that this is going to be steel, because the idea is it's a steel platform, it's a scaffolding that supports the weight of all this brass. So I want to kind of take the same approach as I took with the actual sculpture. This will be a metallic metal with plenty of weathering, but the weathering will be different. Where this is weathering for like a copper or brass, this is going to be weathering for steel. Now you won't be able to see most of this, but you will be able to see this, so I think that's going to be an important detail. As for the model itself, I'm probably going to go with something like a dark gray. I don't want to go with a straight up black because I've already got too many black models. But something gray. Maybe I'll go in there and add a couple of like stripings, not like camouflage, but like something to break up the contours, just so that the viewer can see, he's in camouflage. That's why he's so dark. And everything about this model is going to be dark. He's a sniper. He's hiding in the shadows, so there's not going to be much color at all. I will use a little bit of color here and there, just because it's going to be way monotonous if I don't have any color. So this should be interesting. It should be an interesting challenge. And if I just mess up, it's not like I have to show anyone else my horrible work, right? Let's give it a shot. This should be interesting. Maybe I'll learn something here. Right, the first step is base coating. In this case, not base coat glazing the way I normally do things. As I've already mentioned, the sculpture piece, the statue piece, is different. So I just did a fairly generous dry brush with a mixture of this guy. It's Weapon Bronze from Army Painter, and this guy, Plate Mail Metal from Army Painter. It's one of, not the shiniest silvers. The idea is that I want it to have like a brassy, bronzy look without overpowering it with brass. And so I combined both of these to give me kind of a nice middle. Once that dry brush went on, I went back over it with a separate dry brush, a little bit lighter, with just the Weapon Bronze, because it ended up being a little too silvery. I wanted it to look a little bit more coppery, brassy, but still with plenty of that silvery note in there. I think it looked pretty nice. I made sure to dry brush kind of going down, kind of mimicking the pattern of light hitting the statue, so the undersides stayed in shadow, and those ended up not getting any of the paint, so they're nice and dark. I think it looked pretty nice. For the assassin model, I went with a pretty subdued color scheme for the base. The idea I wanted to present was overall darkness, but still with some color. So for the scaffolding, I went with my plan of the black undercoat. I'm going to silver that up with a little dry brushing later, but for now it's very dark black. I want the silver to be the highlights and the black to be the shadows, so that should do the trick quite nicely. For the assassin's uniform, I went with a custom mix of purple and black. The purple that I used was this guy, Xeris Purple. It's from Citadel Color. You'll notice I have it in my own dropper bottle. I got sick of scooping it out of the little pot. Since I only have a couple of Citadel Color paints, that wasn't such a bad deal. If I had a bunch, it'd be a different story, I think. Anyway, I mixed it in with some matte black from Army Painter. I can't give you the exact proportions of each, but a little bit of black goes a long way in darkening up the original color. For the weapon, that big old lovely rifle that our assassin friend is carrying, I did something similar. I used Dragon Red from Army Painter and mixed it up with some matte black, and that color, that custom mix, went onto the body of the weapon. The suppressor, I kept it black. I also chose black for a couple of other pieces of equipment, most notably the helmet and some other elements. He's got like an electronics pack on his back. I'll probably metallize that later, Not sure what I'm going to do with the suppressor yet. I don't know if I'm going to go with a metallic dry brush over that, or if I'm going to do just a highlight of gray. I don't know. I'll have to think about that a little bit more when I get to it. And finally, for the equipment, like the holsters and the back, the packs, the knife sheath, I went with my darkest brown. It's a little brighter than the rest of the model, but I think it'll be fine, because in the next step, I'm going to do some washing. Alright, let's take a look at our progress so far. We've just finished the base coat phase, and the statue looks like this. Looks pretty decent already, but in the next steps I'll weather it up quite a bit more so it looks old and what have you. I made sure to do the same thing kind of on the inside and all along the edges. It was pretty shiny. I may have to dial that back with some wash. I'm not sure. I'll have to think about what I want to do with that in the next phase. And so I can't show you the entire model because this stuff mounts on to this scaffolding, and if I do that now, I'll never be able to paint this guy, so I'm doing those separately. So let's talk about this guy. Here he is. Pretty subdued, but there are still some colors in there. I wanted to avoid the temptation of going with just straight black or even straight gray, although I did consider it for quite a bit. I wanted a bit more color on my assassin. It's fine. It's fine. And it looks okay. It's a little drab, but that's fine because we'll make that a little spicier in this next step, which is washing. Well, the washing went quicker than I expected. Here's where we are. And it looks okay. I'm not sure I'm happy with my color selections now. I don't know if the purple and the red go well together, but I'm not unhappy enough to change it. So I think I'm going to keep it. And certainly in next steps, I'll try to add some highlights to bring it up a little bit. It's fairly dark. That was the point, but I may have succeeded a little too much on that objective. As for the statue itself, I don't think it looks half bad. It looks pretty decent. I kind of like the way it looks. It kind of looks like a bronze statue, which is what I was going for. So you'll excuse my surprise, but I wasn't expecting it to actually work. I wanted to get close, but I think it looks pretty good. I mean, I know I'm tooting my own horn, and I apologize in advance. And I'm not sure how this goes. I imagine it's something like this. But yeah, I buy it as a bronze statue that's been broken up. Yeah, I don't know what it's going to look like with this guy kind of peeking out here. But it'll probably be fine. And the washing took very little time. I mean, this guy was just all null oil all over the place, so that wasn't that big a deal. There wasn't that much. The thing that took a little bit more time, but really even at that, it wasn't very much at all, was the washing to add the rust kind of effect. So on these girders, or on the scaffold, it's going to be silver, and I made sure to add iron rust, so it's kind of a red. I mixed in this stuff. I mixed it with quite a bit of water. I made it very thin. It was in fact thin enough that when I touched a pretty loaded brush, I touched it to this very top corner, and it just kind of ran down. Almost like a liquid would, and that's kind of how rust works, right? You get water on it, it drips down because of gravity, and so it had that impact, and I think it looks fairly natural. There's a lot less up here, and it pulls at the bottom. I like the way that looks. I don't know that I could have pulled that off to look more natural if I tried it, but there's a couple of spots up here. I think that's fine. I did something similar with this statue. I mixed a couple of different colors, but it was mostly this guy. It was mostly this electric blue, but I added just a little touch of this green skin. It's kind of a bright green, and then a little bit of this mummy robes. It's kind of an off-white. The idea was to give me like a chalky, bluish, greenish kind of a wash. And so when I mixed it all with quite a bit of water, I ended up with this. And so the bluish greenish is supposed to represent the patina of like copper, but I believe brass is copper and something else. So that's where the chalkiness comes from, and I think it looks pretty good. And so what I did is I made sure to just with a thinner brush load it up and touch it on certain edges, usually the bottom edges or anywhere where water would run down. So from the top up, so it would pull towards the bottom and it runs down channels. I made sure that those are the areas that got that wash. So yeah, I think they look pretty good. So what's next? What's next? I guess what's next is let's do some dry brushing. We'll make sure this has some shine. I won't do this yet, but I'll do some dry brushing on this part. I don't think the rest of the model needs a dry brush. I'll add the highlights with some glazing, but I'll do that later. For the model, for the assassin on his scaffolding, I did do a bit of dry brushing, this time with a little bit of gunmetal, also from Army Painter. It's a darker shade of silver, and I used that on the rusty iron thing. And so it was a very light dry brushing, basically to emphasizes the edges and the rivets of the scaffolding in a very nice, subtle way without detracting from the rusty look. I think I like it. It might be a little too subtle. The scaffolding doesn't look as metallic as it could, but then again, it is in shadow, so that's probably okay. Yeah. The dry brushing is done. Let's take a look at the results. Here is one of the parts of my statue, and I don't know if you can tell, but like right on these edges right here, 1, 2, 3, I added some of that silver, some up here, definitely some on this upper edge, some here. They're very, very subtle, but I think that it brings a little something to the table. Same thing here. It's just kind of the sharp forward-facing edges, any of the top edges here and here. Yeah, I think it gives it a nice little something. And for the actual assassin, again, a very subtle dry brush of metallic silver, a little darker, and you can see how all the edges are defined as a result, and all the rivets stand out as slightly more reflective than the rest of the scaffolding. I think that's cool. The assassin himself didn't get any dry brushing. I will have to go in there and add some highlights, but that's going to happen at a different stage. So let's first go into the detailing. Yeah, detailing. For the details, there weren't a ton of things that I picked out because there just wasn't a whole lot of details on the model. Not in a bad way. There was the appropriate number of details, just, you know, by sheer number. There weren't too many. And so what was left basically were all those straps holding the assassin's gear to his legs and his body. So I hit them with a little bit of brown leather. and did some washing over them as well. I made sure to fill in the eyeballs, the goggles, and I did that with some speed paint. And one of the things that I've noticed about speed paint is that it leaves behind a very saturated, kind of a candy-looking color behind, and it finally dawned on me that this is exactly what I want for certain things like computer panels and eyeballs and things that are glowy. And I think those, they ended up looking pretty good. I picked out a few details here and there on the weapon and on the kind of the backpack that our assassin's wearing. But other than that, there wasn't a ton left to do. It was just a touch here and there to leave it, looking the way it should. Here is my assassin, Umbral 6, in that statue thing. And I'm pretty happy with it overall. There's a couple of things that that I want to niggle about, but I think I'm a big fan of how this statue turned out. In terms of the painting, assembling this thing was kind of a chore because the pieces, there's often one or two small points of contact to hold such large pieces together, and so the assembly was a little iffy for me. You can kind of tell there's a seam that is kind of unsightly where the halo connects to this lower part, and there's some hairs that ended up, it's dog fur, and there's some dog fur that ended up getting caught up in the glue because in my apartment there's dog hair everywhere. So I will say that I'm pretty happy with the statue. I'm less happy with the assassin itself. I don't know how I feel about the color selection. Maybe it could have gone with a different color for the weapon. Maybe it's too bright purple. I don't know, but it looks okay. I'm reasonably happy with what he looks like. I just kind of wanted more somehow. But I feel like that's probably more dog fur. I feel like that's probably natural to want to kind of improve the results that you've got going on. Here's the back. You can kind of see more of what's going on. I opted for more color than I initially expected just because I wanted him to stand out a little bit, despite the fact that he is in shadow. There have to be some allowances made for being able to see the assassin, right? You have to be able to see him, otherwise it's just a statue with some shadows in it. I think overall this project was it was a little harder to build this guy than I expected. Clearly, it's not for beginners, and the size of it also is kind of unexpected. It's somehow smaller than I expected. As you can tell here, I'm holding it. You can see how high it is off the base, which gave me some issues about when I had to decide what to do for the base, because this is probably higher up off the ground than this model suggests. Like, it implies it's higher up. You wouldn't have the bust of a Adeptus Sororitas this far off the ground. I mean, maybe it's on a plinth as opposed to a big old statue, but the implication is that it's kind of, he's on a high vantage point, and it's like just a few inches off the ground. So it's a little weird. You would expect to see some rubble on the floor, and that's kind of what I attempted to do. I don't know, it was weird. But it's done. It wasn't bad. And I had better results with the statue than I expected. I was really afraid of this because it's on a basically larger scale. And so the level of detail was supposed to go down so that your weathering effects are going to be more important. And it turns out I'm doing okay on the weathering effects. It's the small stuff that is harder for me to do, and that's okay. I've got some practice yet to do. I did attempt some glazing in the details section of this project, where see, more dog hair. Where I added some brighter spots of purple to different parts of the model where he would be exposed, a little bit of gray on the black parts, some red highlights on the weapon, and they look okay, but, you know, but I want more. But honestly, I've very seldom tried to do a little bit of glazing, like for highlighting, and so I should probably give myself a break, acknowledge that I have ways to go, and make a commitment to practice, to try this more often so that my results will improve the way my other results have improved. Before I end the video, I want to show you kind of a size comparison. I don't know if it was true for you, but it certainly was for me. I thought this was bigger for some reason. Here is an intercessor. He's a Primaris Space Marine. This guy is Deathwatch Chapter, but that doesn't matter in this thing. So basically, this assassin statue thing is probably 2.5 times taller than your normal dude here. So it's considerably smaller than, say, an armiger. And since I have some, let me just put these next to each other so you can kind of see them. Here's a dreadnought from Space Marines. So this is starting to get to the size of this model, the assassin model. Here is an armiger right here. The armiger is just a little taller than the entire thing, so I think this will give you an idea for the scale of this statue. It's a neat model if you have subscribed to Warhammer Plus and you're thinking about getting it. Yeah, I think it's a worthwhile project to take up, even if you're not going to field it in your game. You can keep it on your desk. You can keep it on your bookshelves and look at it like, hey, look what I can do. If nothing else, working with the different scale, like the scale of the statue here, is an interesting experience, and hopefully should make you a bit of a better painter. And that is all I've got for you today. I hope I have given you a little bit of confidence on tackling this project. It's a quick one. Took me 2 days of part-time working on it. So it's a quick one. It looks good, and it is educational, for sure. Thank you very much for watching Your Average Bear Gaming. Have a wonderful afternoon. Be nice to yourselves and each other. Peace!